Imagine throwing a really lavish dinner party.
Yeah.
Like you spend thousands of dollars on catering, you hired a live band, you set up the most beautiful seating arrangements.
Right, a really high-end event.
Yeah, the whole works. And then you intentionally send invitations only to people who actively despise you,
Oh, wow.
right? You invite, like, the coworker who tried to get you fired or the neighbor who sued you over a property line.
That is a terrible guest list.
It is. And you invite a dozen strangers who will eat your really expensive food and never even look you in the eye to say thank you.
Man, that sounds completely
It
insane.
sounds like a total disaster.
Yeah,
In our modern world, well, that is a recipe for just being taken advantage of.
absolutely.
But according to a manuscript written 3 centuries ago, that scenario is the baseline for Christian goodness. So welcome to Reformed Thinking. I am thrilled you were joining us for this deep dive into our source material today because we are going to look at an economy of giving that makes absolutely 0 sense to Wall Street.
0 cents at all.
And quite frankly, it often makes 0 sense to our own natural instincts.
Yeah, that dinner party scenario, well, it is the perfect entry point. It immediately highlights the friction between how society operates and the biblical standard of love.
It really does.
Because we usually operate with this internal ledger. You know, we like human interactions to be predictable. We like them balanced.
Well, it's quid pro quo.
Spot on. You help a friend move their furniture across town, and the expectation is, well, they buy you a pizza.
Yeah, or they help you move next time.
Yeah. Or you donate your resources to a local cause, and you get a tax deduction.
Wow.
Or maybe a brass nameplate on a wall.
It is a closed system, debit and credit.
Yes, very transactional. But when we look at the historical text we are analyzing today, that entire ledger just gets thrown right out the window.
So the text we are unpacking is from the theologian Jonathan Edwards. Specifically, his writings on the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. And the phrase we are zeroing in on is, charity suffereth long and is kind. For anyone listening, maybe on your commute or while doing dishes right now, the mission of this deep dive is to systematically break down what it genuinely means to possess a Christian spirit that freely and cheerfully does good to others.
Which is a lot harder than it sounds.
It really is.
Yeah.
We're going to examine the physical act of doing good, the specific people who are supposed to receive this good, and the internal attitude required to execute it.
And the motivations driving the whole thing.
Yes, the motivations too. And Edwards, he starts by splitting the concept of doing good into two distinct categories, the soul and the body.
Right. He calls these spiritual good and temporal good. And he sets up a very clear hierarchy right out of the gate.
He does.
Doing good to the souls of others, providing spiritual good, is the highest and most excellent form of charity.
He argues that if you are the instrument of spiritual and eternal good to someone, you have given them something greater than the wealth of the entire universe.
Yeah, the logic here is rooted in eternal weight. If human beings are eternal creatures, then temporary physical comfort, while necessary, is infinitely less weighty than their eternal standing before God.
Spiritual good addresses the eternal reality.
Precisely.
And he details specific methods for how we are supposed to provide this spiritual good. Like, he talks about taking pains to instruct the ignorant, leading them to knowledge.
Which takes a lot of patience.
It really does. He talks about counseling, warning others, and stirring them up to care for their own welfare.
Yeah.
He even includes reproving those who are out of the way of duty. Now, this is interesting. In a modern cultural context, telling someone they are, out of the way of duty or warning them about their spiritual state, well, that is often viewed as the ultimate taboo.
Oh, highly taboo.
We are so conditioned to just mind our own business. The idea of reproving someone feels almost arrogant to the modern ear. So how does Edwards frame this so it is an act of charity rather than like an act of pride?
That is a really crucial distinction to make, because modern culture views reproof as an attack on autonomy.
Right. Don't judge me.
Yeah, exactly that. But Edwards, drawing from the broader Reformed tradition, he views reproof as the ultimate rescue mission.
Okay, a rescue mission.
Yeah, think about it like this. If you see a blind man walking toward the edge of a cliff, minding your own business is not an act of love.
No, it is an act of callousness.
Spot on. Warning him is an act of charity. However, Edwards understands human nature. He knows that people are, well, naturally resistant to being corrected.
Nobody likes being told they are wrong.
No, not at all. And this brings us to one of the most striking points in this first section, his absolute insistence on the role of example.
Yes.
Edwards argues that setting a good example is the most needful tool of all.
This part stopped me in my tracks when I was reading it. He basically says that if you are instructing or counseling someone, but your own life does not reflect the truth you are speaking, well, those words and warnings are entirely in vain.
They fall completely flat.
It is a massive reality check. You can have the most articulate theological arguments.
Yeah.
You can offer the most eloquent counsel to a secure and careless person. But if your daily conduct contradicts your speech, it is completely empty.
Hypocrisy kills the message.
It really does.
Example is the most effectual method for promoting the good of another person's soul. Without a corresponding life, your spiritual counsel lacks any force to take effect.
Can you give an example of what that looks like?
Sure. So if you tell a friend that they need to trust God's providence during a financial crisis,
Okay.
but you yourself are constantly anxious, grasping, and, cutting corners in your business deals,
Right.
your friend will look at your life and conclude that your theology has no actual substance. The example has to accompany the means.
Because your life provides the visible proof that the spiritual realities you speak of are actually real.
Yes, they have to see it working in you.
Okay, so we have this extremely high calling for spiritual good, demanding both truth-telling and a matching lifestyle. But Edwards does not just leave us floating in a purely spiritual realm.
No, he brings it right down to earth.
He immediately addresses temporal good, which involves helping people with their outward state in this world. And this raises a really interesting tension for me.
Oh.
Yeah. If spiritual good is the goal, and it has eternal value, why should a person spend so much time and resources on physical, temporal needs? Let me run an analogy by you.
Okay, let's hear it.
Is temporal aid sort of like anesthesia? Like if someone needs life-saving surgical intervention, the surgeon has to administer anesthesia first.
That makes sense.
Because the physical pain of the body is so loud and so overwhelming that, well, you have to address it before you can do the necessary internal work. Is that kind of how Edwards views temporal charity?
He uses a very similar logic, though perhaps less clinical than anesthesia.
Right, sure.
He argues that meeting external needs, feeding the hungry, helping strangers, visiting the sick, it literally opens the door for spiritual instruction.
It softens the ground.
Yes.
Mm.
When your theological counsel is accompanied by outward kindness, it gives those spiritual words their full force. People are far more likely to appreciate and receive your efforts for their eternal welfare when you have first demonstrated that you care about their immediate physical suffering.
It bridges the gap.
It does. The physical relief validates the spiritual concern. If a person is freezing and starving, the immediate crisis of the body consumes their entire capacity.
You can't preach to a starving man.
Exactly. Stepping into that crisis with tangible help shows a holistic love. It reflects the way Christ healed the sick and fed the multitudes alongside preaching the kingdom.
And Edwards lays out 3 very specific ways we are supposed to help temporally.
Yes, he does.
First, by giving what we have. This means parting with our actual substance, whether that is money, food, or resources. This is, the most straightforward method.
Right. Writing a check or buying groceries.
Yeah. If you have extra and someone lacks, you give it to them. It is the transfer of material wealth. Second, he says we are to do or labor for others. He references the Apostle Paul laboring night and day.
So this is about giving our time and physical energy.
Exactly. You might not have a massive bank account to write a check for someone's medical bills, but you can drive them to their appointment.
You can mow their lawn.
Yeah. You can fix their broken water heater. You labor for them.
And the third category is perhaps the most challenging. He talks about suffering for others, or bearing their burdens.
Suffering. That is a heavy word.
It is. He points to Galatians 6, verse 2 for this. This means taking on inconvenience and actual hardship to make someone else's load lighter.
Okay, so going beyond just being helpful.
Right. It is one thing to write a check from your surplus. It is an entirely different thing to absorb someone else's pain or inconvenience into your own life. These 3 categories, giving, laboring, and suffering, they cover the entire spectrum of human capability.
It really leaves no room for excuses.
Not at all.
That is a brilliant point. Because the excuse of, I do not have enough money to be charitable, completely evaporates under this framework.
It vanishes.
You have time. You have energy. You have the capacity to sit with someone in their grief or bear the brunt of their physical struggles.
Everyone has something they can offer.
So knowing what actions to take, whether spiritual or temporal, giving, laboring, or suffering, well, that leads us to the question of who is supposed to be on the receiving end of all this effort?
And this is where Edwards introduces a truly uncomfortable definition of the neighbor.
Uncomfortable is definitely the right word.
He looks at the lawyer in the Gospel of Luke who asks, "Who is my neighbor?" And he breaks the answer down into three distinct pairs of recipients.
Okay, what are the pairs?
The first pair is the good and the bad. The second pair is friends and enemies. And the third pair is the thankful and the unthankful.
Wow.
Yeah. He systematically dismantles our natural tendency to filter our charity.
I really want to push back on this, or at least voice the frustration that any modern listener is going to feel hearing this list.
It is a very natural frustration to have.
Because it is entirely natural to help our friends and the people we consider good. But helping the outright bad, or the constantly unthankful, it feels like a total misuse of limited resources.
It feels like a bad investment.
Yeah. We hear so much today about, setting boundaries and protecting our peace from toxic people. If someone constantly takes advantage of your kindness, or if they take your money and use it poorly without a shred of gratitude, why should a person keep giving to them?
It is exhausting.
It feels like throwing good seed on a concrete sidewalk.
Edwards actually anticipates that exact reaction.
Does he?
He does. The desire to protect our resources and demand a return on our investment is deeply ingrained in us. But Edwards grounds his response entirely in the theology of Matthew chapter 5.
Okay, the Sermon on the Mount.
Yes. We are explicitly called to imitate our Heavenly Father. And what does the Father do? He makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust.
He blesses indiscriminately?
Precisely. The world is full of people with hateful dispositions, people who are proud, covetous, profane, or unjust. Edwards argues that these bad qualities should never hinder our beneficence.
Never.
Never. In fact, those bad qualities are the very reason we should be diligent to benefit them, with the hope of winning them over.
That is a staggering thought.
It is the logic of common grace. God sustains the breath of the very people who curse his name. If we are called to bear the image of Christ, our charity must reflect that same unmerited benevolence.
He is particularly sharp when it comes to the unthankful. I noticed a really strong critique in the text for people who use ingratitude as an excuse to stop giving.
Oh, he pulls no punches there.
He doesn't. People will say, well, if I help them, they will never thank me, and they might even return my kindness with injury.
Right, they use that as a shield.
Yeah. And Edwards responds to that mindset by claiming that it shows a severe lack of acquaintance with the rules of Christianity. Like, if you require a thank you note to validate your charity, you are missing the entire framework.
Because if your charity is contingent on the recipient's gratitude, then your charity was never actually about the recipient.
It was about you.
Spot on. It was about your own ego. You were purchasing a feeling of moral superiority, and the price was your donation.
Wow.
When the recipient failed to provide the gratitude, the transaction fell through, and you felt cheated. Edwards exposes that hidden selfishness so clearly.
That stings a bit to hear.
It does. The biblical mandate, as Edwards points out in Romans 12, is to overcome evil with good. When we look at the category of the enemy, Edwards notes that retaliation is strictly forbidden.
No getting even.
No. Doing good to those who hate us is the only acceptable response for a Christian. We are not to render evil for evil, but contrariwise, blessing.
So if someone slanders you at work and, ruins your reputation, the natural response is to retaliate, or at least cut them out of your life completely.
Set those boundaries.
Right. But Edwards is saying that if that person suddenly falls into a desperate situation, like, say, their house burns down, you are obligated to help them, and not just with a reluctant check, but with genuine labor and burden bearing.
Yes. You have to overcome their evil with your good.
It's a massive shift in perspective. Because if the list of recipients includes our bitter enemies and the profoundly ungrateful, then the internal attitude required to execute this kind of charity, well, it must be entirely free of selfish motives.
You cannot fake that kind of goodwill for very long.
No, you really can't. Which leads us right into the next major concept Edwards unpacks. The manner of our goodwill, or what it means to do good freely.
The word freely is the hinge on which this entire teaching turns.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, you can perform all the right outward actions for all the wrong inward reasons. Edwards defines doing good freely through three specific criteria.
What are they?
First, the action must not be mercenary. Second, it must be hearty or cheerful. And third, it must be liberal or bountiful.
Let us look at that first one. A mercenary spirit.
A mercenary spirit is one that acts for the sake of a reward received or expected from the person being helped.
Which is how the entire world operates. I look at a modern world built almost entirely on networking, quid pro quo arrangements, and, return on investment.
Everything is an investment.
It is. You take someone to lunch to secure a business deal. You do a favor for a colleague so they owe you one later. We even see this in philanthropy.
Oh, definitely.
Corporations donate millions to charity, but they spend equal amounts on marketing campaigns to ensure the public knows about their donation.
It is PR.
Right. In light of that culture, Edwards' command to invite the poor and the maimed, people who possess absolutely zero capacity to repay you, is wildly countercultural. It completely disrupts the way we are trained to operate.
Edwards looks at the parable in Luke 14 to make this point. When you make a feast, you are commanded not to call your friends or your rich neighbors.
Because they can pay you back?
Precisely. Because they might invite you back and recompense you. Instead, you call the lame and the blind. Doing good cannot be about securing temporal gain, honor, or profit.
It has to stem solely from a spirit of love.
Yes. If you are tracking the return on your charitable investment, it ceases to be charity. It becomes commerce. A mercenary spirit turns every relationship into a transaction. Edwards is calling for a radical break from that commercial mindset.
You give simply because the need exists and you have the capacity to meet it.
That is it.
That brings us to the second criteria. It must be hearty and cheerful. The requirement here is to give without grudging.
No heavy sighs.
Right. It is not enough to just open your wallet or sacrifice your Saturday. You have to actually want to do it. You cannot grit your teeth and force the action while harboring resentment in your mind.
God loves a cheerful giver.
But let us be honest. There are times when helping someone is deeply inconvenient. If your phone rings at 2:00 v.m. because someone needs help, your initial reaction is probably not unbridled joy.
No, it is usually panic or annoyance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we reconcile the command to be cheerful with the reality of human fatigue and frustration? Is it just a matter of, faking it till you make it?
Not at all. It is not about manufacturing fake enthusiasm. Edwards explains the psychology behind this beautifully. He says that an action done from true love is always done with delight.
Even at 2 a.m.
Even at 2 a.m., if you genuinely love the person you are helping, the act of helping them brings you joy, even if the physical task is exhausting.
Give me an example of that.
Think about a mother waking up at 3 a.m. to care for a sick infant.
Oh, right.
She is exhausted, the task is unpleasant, but because she possesses a very abiding love for the child, she does not do it grudgingly, she does it willingly. The love overrides the inconvenience.
That makes perfect sense.
He quotes 2 Corinthians 9, highlighting that God loves a cheerful giver. The very essence of acceptable giving in the scriptures requires a cordial spirit. You are not supposed to be grieved in your heart when you give to your neighbor.
And the third criteria is that the giving must be liberal and bountiful. We are commanded to be open-handed, not scant or sparing.
Generosity is key.
Edwards points to the agricultural concept of sowing bountifully to reap bountifully. You don't just give the bare minimum to check a moral box. You abound to every good work.
Right. If you see a need, you meet it abundantly. You don't calculate the absolute lowest amount of effort required to assuage your conscience.
You can see how these three criteria, non-mercenary, cheerful, and bountiful, work together to form a complete picture of a renewed heart.
They interlock perfectly.
But the standard is incredibly high. You have the action itself reaching both the body and the soul. You have the recipients encompassing your worst enemies. And you have the attitude demanding cheerful, bountiful, non-transactional giving.
It is a lot to take in.
It is. Naturally, a person looking at this framework has to ask, well, how do I even diagnose my own heart? How do I know if my goodwill is genuine or just a performance?
That leads to a vital theological distinction Edwards makes, which is really fascinating.
Okay, what is it?
He contrasts the love of complacence with the love of benevolence.
When I first read this, it clarifies so much of the internal conflict we feel when dealing with difficult people.
It is a game changer.
So, does this mean I do not have to delight in the evil actions or the toxic personality of my enemy, which would be complacence, in order to still wish them well and seek their benefit, which is benevolence?
That is the exact distinction he is drawing. The love of complacence is a delight in the inherent qualities of the object.
Like enjoying a good meal or a nice sunset.
Right, or feeling complacence toward a virtuous person or a close friend who shares your values. You enjoy them for who they are. But benevolence is entirely different.
How so?
Benevolence is goodwill. It is the desire for the good of another person regardless of their inherent loveliness or unloveliness.
Okay, so I don't have to like my enemy.
No, you do not have to find your enemy charming. You do not have to endorse their behavior. You do not have to enjoy their company. But you must possess benevolence toward them. You must genuinely desire their physical and spiritual welfare.
This makes so much sense when you view it through the lens of Reformed theology regarding how God loves fallen humanity.
Yes, the parallel is perfect.
Because God did not look at a rebellious, sinful humanity and feel the love of complacence. There was nothing inherently lovely about our rebellion that God would delight in it.
Our condition was one of total depravity.
Right. Instead, God exercised the love of benevolence. He willed our good, providing a mediator and a path to redemption, despite our unloveliness.
It is a massive display of grace.
If we are called to be imitators of God, our charity has to function the same way. We look at the unthankful and the enemy. We acknowledge their unloveliness, and we will their good anyway.
It is a profound reflection of grace. Benevolence is the main thing in Christian love. It is a spirit that delights in seeking the good of others.
But Edwards does not let us off the hook with just a private, internal feeling of benevolence, does he?
Not at all. Because we humans are very good at deceiving ourselves.
We really are.
We like to think we are loving people because we feel a vague sense of goodwill toward humanity in general. But Edwards introduces the ultimate test of sincerity to pierce through that self-deception.
The test of action.
Yes. He says the conclusive evidence that you actually possess this benevolence is action. The proof of willing good is doing it.
He argues that the act always follows the will, assuming there is power to act. If you sincerely desire the good of another person, you will seek it in your practice.
Sincerity of desire never stops at words.
If you have the means to help, but you do nothing, your internal feeling of goodwill is an illusion. And Edwards brings in the book of James, chapter 2, to hammer this point home.
It is the perfect scripture for this.
If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and you simply say to them, "Depart in peace, be warmed and filled," but you do not actually hand them a coat or a meal.
What does it profit?
Right. It yields zero profit to the starving person.
And more importantly, for Edwards' argument, it yields zero evidence of sincerity on your part. Your so-called love is a complete fiction.
Ouch.
Yeah. If you actually desired them to be warm, you would provide the heat. The Apostle James uses this analogy to explain the relationship between faith and works. A faith that produces no action is a dead faith.
So a love that produces no charity is a dead love.
Exactly. The outward action is the necessary fruit of the inward reality. You cannot claim to possess the Christian spirit of charity if your hands are closed.
It strips away all the comfortable illusions we build for ourselves. We can post all the right things on social media.
We can say all the right prayers.
We can feel a deep sense of pity when we watch the evening news. But Edwards says those feelings are meaningless without the corresponding deeds. The ledger of your actual actions is the only reliable diagnostic tool for your heart.
That is a tough pill to swallow.
Having set this uncompromising standard and providing the test for sincerity, Edwards moves into the final section of his teaching, which is a combination of very sharp critique and highly motivating exhortation.
He begins with a direct reproof, calling out specific types of individuals. He targets the malicious, the selfish, and those with a grasping, avaricious spirit.
People who just take and take.
Yes. He describes people who are entirely consumed with their own interests, who never look beyond their own property lines. But what is truly fascinating here is how Edwards takes this very lofty theological text and applies it directly to everyday economics.
Yes, I want to camp out here for a minute because this is where the theology hits the pavement.
He does not leave this in the clouds.
No, he brings it right into the marketplace. He specifically condemns those who extort others or who grind down prices in their business deals.
The everyday transactions.
Right. He describes people who ask more for what they sell than it is truly worth, forcing out of their neighbor every last cent they can get.
Price gouging.
Yeah, price gouging. And conversely, he condemns those who are highly selfish when buying, grinding the seller down to the lowest possible price with no regard for the actual value of the labor involved.
We all know people who pride themselves on being ruthless negotiators.
Oh, absolutely. People who will haggle a struggling contractor down to a price where the contractor barely breaks even. And in modern business, that is often praised as savvy.
Right. It is seen as a skill.
But Edwards labels it a violation of the core law of love.
He points out that this economic ruthlessness is the exact opposite of a Christian spirit. It violates the golden rule, which is doing unto others as you would have them do unto you.
It is that simple.
It is. If you are the seller, you want a fair price that compensates your labor. If you are the buyer, you want a product that is reasonably priced. A Christian operating in the marketplace should not be looking to squeeze every drop of blood out of the person across the table.
Their benevolence should extend to their economic transactions.
Yes, they should want the other person to walk away from the deal feeling respected and fairly treated.
It really makes you look at your daily transactions in a completely different light. Like,
Yeah.
are you paying people fairly? Are you tipping generously?
Are you demanding unreasonable discounts?
Exactly. These microtransactions reveal the true nature of your benevolence, just as much as a large charitable donation does. But Edwards does not end his discourse on critique.
No, he knows that human beings need positive motivation.
So he transitions into an exhortation, giving the listener 4 distinct motivations to execute this kind of charity. The first motivation is the sheer honor of being an instrument of good.
He uses some beautiful imagery here. He compares humans who do good to the sun, the moon, and the stars that shed light on the earth.
That is a high comparison.
It is. He compares them to angels, who are ministering spirits sent out to help. And most astonishingly, he compares them to God himself, who is the great fountain of all good.
So when you act in charity, you are aligning your nature with the nature of the cosmos as God designed it.
Yes, and you are reflecting the character of the Creator. It is an elevated status. You are participating in the divine nature, in a sense.
The second motivation he offers is the golden rule. We all highly commend kindness when we are the recipients of it.
We love being helped.
We do. When someone drops everything to bear our burdens in a crisis, we speak well of them and recognize the beauty of their action. We feel the relief of being helped. So Edwards argues that we ought to replicate what we so highly approve of in others.
It is an appeal to our own lived experience.
The third motivation is looking at the example of Christ.
He points to 2 Corinthians 8, verse 9 for this, noting that Christ was universally wealthy, possessing all the riches of the universe, yet for our sakes he became poor, so that we, through his poverty, might become rich.
And he did this while we were utterly unthankful and deserving only of wrath.
Right. If the one who possessed everything gave it all up for enemies who possess nothing, how much more should we, who are merely stewards of God's resources, be willing to share with our fellow humans?
That brings to mind how temporary our resources really are.
Yeah.
And then we hit the fourth motivation, which is the promise of massive rewards from God.
Yes, the rewards.
And I have to push back here because I spot an apparent paradox.
Okay, let's hear it.
We spent a significant amount of time earlier discussing how Edwards was adamant that we must not be mercenary.
We did.
We cannot expect anything in return. We cannot operate on a quid pro quo basis. But now, at the very end of his argument, he is openly motivating us with the promise of rewards.
He is.
He talks about scattering and increasing and eternal blessings. So how do these two ideas coexist without contradicting each other? Like, if I am giving because I want the reward God promises, haven't I just become mercenary again, just on a cosmic scale?
It is a brilliant tension to notice, and it is a classic theological hurdle. Edwards resolves this by distinguishing between human manipulation and trusting God's providence.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, a mercenary spirit is one that manipulates a transaction for a direct payoff. You give a gift to a wealthy man so he will give you a bigger gift. You invite the boss to dinner so you get the promotion.
Right, you're working the system.
Yes, that is mercenary. You are relying on human mechanisms, but trusting God for a reward is different. God has structured the universe so that his blessing, both temporal and eternal, is the natural harvest of bountiful sowing.
So it's built into the fabric of creation.
Exactly. Trusting his character and his promises is an act of faith, not a mercenary scheme.
So it is the difference between bribing a judge and trusting a farmer's field.
That is a great way to put it.
You don't bribe a field to grow corn. You throw the seed out generously because you trust the nature of the soil and the laws of harvest that God set in place. You are not doing the math to force a return on investment. You are operating in faith.
Yes, you give freely and you leave the results entirely in God's hands, knowing that he's a good father who loves to bless his children.
That takes the manipulation right out of it.
It does. Even unregenerate men who give generously are often prospered by providence, simply because they are operating in alignment with the way God designed the world to work. Generosity breeds trust, community, and mutual aid.
But the ultimate focus for Edwards is on the eternal reward, isn't it?
It is. He points to the Judgment Day separation depicted in Matthew 25. When all people are gathered, the king will say to those who are benevolent, "Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me."
The ultimate reward is not a bigger bank account.
No. The ultimate reward is the commendation of Christ. The actions of charity were the visible proof of the invisible faith.
That brings the entire framework full circle. To summarize this massive vision Edwards has laid out, true Christian charity is an all-encompassing force. It reaches both the physical body and the eternal soul.
It covers everything.
It extends to the closest friend and the most bitter enemy. It demands a heart that is cheerful and hands that are entirely open.
No closed fists.
It forces you to look at the annoying, ungrateful person in your life, not as a nuisance to be avoided, but as an opportunity to reflect the unmerited benevolence of God.
It requires an individual to completely abandon the internal ledger we talked about at the beginning.
You throw away the scoreboards.
You do. You are no longer keeping score of who owes you what or who has thanked you sufficiently. You are operating from a wellspring of benevolence that desires the good of the object simply because it is the nature of a Christian spirit to do so.
You give because Christ gave.
Yes, you love because you were first loved when you were still an enemy.
And so we leave you with a final thought to mull over. If you were listening to this right now, think about your own life over the last 30 days.
A little self-examination.
We have discussed how the ultimate test of sincerity is action, and how true grace manifests in outward deeds, especially toward those who have zero capacity to repay you. So if that is the standard, what would a complete stranger conclude about your theology just by looking at your bank statements and your calendar for the past month?
That is a very revealing test.
Would they see the closed, calculated ledger of the world? Or would they see the open hands of a cheerful giver? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material today. Keep thinking critically about how you live out your beliefs.